And I'd like to start off with poems about the intoxication of love, or the bad decision-making that comes along with love. There was a story that came out from like a long time ago, it seems like now, where the woman who raised a chimp, and then the chimp attacked her friend. And there was this quote that she had when she was being interviewed, and she said, "Would I have done it again? Yes. It was horrific what happened, and I had to do what I had to do, but I'll miss him for the rest of my life." And it just struck me as this beautiful, sad, strange relationship and thing to say, and she viewed this as her offspring, so it prompted this poem. The owners, the animals. The officer shot the chimp. Once it ripped from a woman her eyes, nose, jaw, chunks of scalp and hair torn out, as if weeds, as if a gardener. And the chimp's owner swore to the reporter she'd do it again, raise the creature as offspring until the mauling, the demolished face of her friend, the frenzy, the bullets piercing the mammal's flesh, again. What startled the reporter didn't shock me. Some of us toast the feral beasts and drink to the owners, because we too repeat the great mistake of love. Even now, years after my friend's wife dreamt she evolved from birds with hollow bones like wine glass stems. Years after I proved it true by tracing her lips with a trembling wet fingertip, and she sang, "I'd do it all again." The finger, the singing, and again without warning, what we thought was tame would unavoidably turn, brutal and against us. Thank you. Rotten Fruit Romantic. There was something wrong with the clouds, and now my day is ruined. My bloodshot eyes are puffy with beauty. In other words, I am perfect in that rom-com sort of way, all safety pin and patches. I am the snap of bird bones between the jaws of a cat, that quiet and delicate. Earlier, I hovered like a hummingbird near my favorite cashier, who has a mouth like a flower, and still I was thirsty. Love, when you come home from work, I'll sing off key. I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk. See, you get me. You finish my very thoughts. For you, I'll mix a tape, a stiff drink with my quick wit. We'll get drunk like feral beasts, and every night that's gone bad, let's slurp like rotten fruit. The next two poems, I owe a huge debt to C.D. Wright, the poet who passed away fairly recently. She had a poem called Personals. It was this just magnificent, goofy, quirky personal out of a poem, and you can't read that and not laugh and not try to imitate it. So I've written a whole series. I'm going to read two of them for today. Personal ad number 4, every word a prescription pill. When I drink, the moon pie of my face ignites. Do you like bonfires? Do you say fireflies or lightning bugs? Your answers will matter. I'm that type of person. I also think those in the throes of the bottle better leave it be. Do you believe it patriotic or traitorous to know our Pledge of Allegiance in many foreign tongues? If you care, I think that's lovely, like a bird of many feathers. I heard that somewhere, bird of many feathers. I think an old professor of mine used to say that. I say old professor, but I never went to college. I just dated the one. He was foreign and said where he comes from all teachers had a favorite student. favorite, in quotes. It makes me not want to travel. Rather, show me a place where the jukebox still plays records. You'll hear notes that history neglects like crumpled love letters. Meet me by the school, close enough to hear the clack of helmets, but far enough away where I won't see a thick boy smile when he lays another boy up. Thank you. Personal ad number 4. Once I lost sleep, the world made sense. I don't sleep well, which suits me. I like infomercials and how impossible everyday tasks appear. It's the only thing on TV that shows life as is, mundane and difficult. But I also like how excited the audience gets. I want to find that kind of bliss. I like the word daybreak, but don't actually like daybreak. I prefer ash to a freshly rolled cigarette. My mother smoked in the morning, the way most people ate breakfast. When I think back, I picture her chewing cigarettes like cud between sips of black coffee. I'm sure she didn't, but memory is funny like that. I worry about aging as often as I worry about milk already soured. Are you old enough to remember Columbus Day as a good thing? I'm not sure what we celebrate anymore. I drink screwdrivers to cope with my father's drinking, which is why I sympathize with foxes gnawing off their own legs. Fight teeth with teeth, no one ever said. Do you know how many wisdoms I've misheard in my life? Enough to know darkness. Enough to know 2 wrongs never made a light.
Those are beautiful and funny. Thank you for those. So I'm going to read a chunk of this book, War of the Encyclopaedists, and I'm going to do so with my esteemed co-author, who I didn't think was going to be in town for this reading, but he just so happens to be, Gavin Kovite, former infantry platoon leader in Baghdad, 2004, also lawyer, graduate of NYU, went back into the Army as a JAG, did that for 4 years, and is now in the reserves and being a writer with me. Recently anthologized in the Bedford Anthology of Literature, alongside Tim O'Brien in the war section. So, kudos, Gavin. This little chunk we're going to read is from a section in the book where this character, Corduroy, has dropped out of grad school in Boston, and he is lying to his parents and his girlfriend about that fact, and is supporting himself through medical studies. Keeping with the theme of poetry and prose, there's some bits of poetry thrown in here. He is reading some confessional poetry for classes he might have taken, but it did not in fact register for. And keeping with the theme of intoxication, there is some drug use in this scene. There's only one book, so we're going to awkwardly bump our shoulders together. Corduroy had saved up what he considered a fair chunk of money in Seattle, but most of that had gone to paying rent to Tricia over the last 5 months. He couldn't depend on his parents anymore, and he couldn't take out loans because he hadn't registered for classes. Monty was already graciously giving him shelter. At the least, he felt obligated to buy food and booze for the two of them. He'd briefly considered getting an actual job, teaching ESL or tutoring for the SAT, but he didn't want to reprise his life in Seattle. Initially, he'd gone to the blood bank. Montauk, that's his best friend who's now deployed in Baghdad. Montauk had always said, there are only 2 ways to be more drunk. Drink more alcohol or have less blood. Unfortunately for Corduroy, this principle led inevitably to the direct transformation of $50 worth of blood to $50 worth of booze. Thus, he had responded eagerly to an ad for a medical study paying $600 and requiring only a small amount of his time, provided he had previously used cocaine. And now here he was on the 10th floor of Massachusetts General Hospital, reading an anthology of confessional poetry, waiting to meet a Dr. Hernandez. Though he hadn't enrolled for the spring semester, he had bought a few books that were on the syllabi for classes he might have taken. It helped keep up the illusion for himself that his current situation was temporary, that he'd catch right back up when he figured things out. It also allowed him to more effectively lie to Monty. He read a few lines of Robert Lowell's Waking in the Blue. Absence, my heart grows tense, as though a harpoon were sparring for the kill. This is the house for the mentally ill. He looked away and tried to remember what was next. He'd memorized that poem for a class some years back, but could remember only scraps of it.
Dr. Hernandez opened the door and introduced herself as Antonia. "There's a dressing gown behind the door," she said, handing him a clipboard. "I'll be back."
Corduroy changed into the paper gown and sat down with the questionnaire. It focused mostly on his past drug use. One of the questions asked if he'd ever used crack cocaine. He was pretty sure the answer was no. About a year ago, he and Montauk had been out drinking on Capitol Hill and had gone down to Broadway to buy some coke. They dropped $50 and walked away with a bag of something white. When they'd examined it back at the encyclopaed, it wasn't powder as they'd expected, but hard crystals. They'd had difficulty cutting it up enough to snort it, so they'd called up Johnny, their resident drug expert.
"Sounds like you bought crack," Johnny said.
The question then was, how do we smoke it? Following Johnny's instructions, they cut the metal nub off of a light bulb with a bread knife, extracted the filament, and shook salt around inside to remove the white coating. They rotated the bulb slowly over a lighter while the crystals inside began to melt and give off vapor trails that they inhaled through a straw they'd made from a Bic pen. Their mouths numbed and they felt lightheaded. According to Johnny, it should have hit them with more intensity and less duration than coke. This was more akin to licking the bag at the end of the night, or leaving the dentist. Was it crack? Corduroy figured it was just the shittiest coke he'd ever bought. It got them high, that was true, but it didn't smoke like it was supposed to. And having tried to smoke crack, or been willing to smoke crack, wasn't the same as actually having smoked it. He checked the box for no, and quickly finished the rest of the forms. A nurse arrived and escorted Corduroy to the MRI room, where Dr. Hernandez was waiting. They laid him down on the extended bed and put an IV in his arm.
"We'll be injecting you with intravenous cocaine," Dr. Hernandez said. "Then we'll slide you into the MRI and ask you questions while we capture images of your brain. When you're done, we'll give you some food and you'll stay here until the cocaine is out of your system. And then you're free to go. Ready?" She held up a large syringe.
What % solution is it? Corduroy asked.
"Sorry?"
Sherlock Holmes injected himself with a 7% solution of cocaine. There's a story about it. Just curious.
Dr. Hernandez began injecting the cocaine. "I'm not sure," she said, looking at Corduroy as if he were an addict who might break into the hospital later that night.
The cocaine surged up his arm, hit his heart, and sent it into a drum roll, building to a fearsome cymbal crash, then took the off-ramp and hit the expressway aorta to his brain. The windows of the house were flung open and spring drafts leapt in and swept out the stale aromas of private consciousness. The doctor hit a button and the bed slowly brought Corduroy into the maw of the MRI like the tongue of a huge beast, languid and sure of its catch. He became aware of the inside of the tube, the seams in the metal, the guard strapped over his head. The cocaine had hit him hard, and he was clenching his jaw several times a second, about every fourth beat of his heart.
"All right, Mr. Corduroy, can you rate your intoxication level on a scale from 1 to 10? 10 being the most intoxicated you've ever felt, and 1 being the least."
"I don't feel intoxicated," Corduroy said. "I feel sober, more than sober." He remembered the first time he'd tried cocaine. He'd been 7 beers deep at 5 in the afternoon, and he could suddenly converse, walk, and drive with a miraculous sobriety.
"Just choose a number."
Can it be negative?
"No."
Fine then, 0. Corduroy thought he heard Dr. Hernandez sigh, but it was hard to hear above the pulsing of his blood in his ears. Or was that the MRI spinning around him? Did it spin?
"And how euphoric do you feel?"
12. Just kidding, 10.
"Your desire for more?"
10. After a few more questions, she told him to lie still while the MRI finished its work. He was twitching his leg and arm muscles, grinding his teeth, trying to channel all his nervous energy away from the top of his head, where the giant magnet was focused not on his head, but on his brain, which he now realized was a meat computer. Lie still. Lie still. What kind of craziness was that? This is cocaine. No weed, quaaludes, mushrooms, no whoa, trippy man, no sit on the couch with a beer and watch the game, alcohol, bullshit. I need to do something. Fuck on coke. Skydive on coke. Say hello to my little friend and go out with a grenade launcher on coke. Flex your toes. This is the house of the mentally ill. Absence. That was backward. Go in for the kill. Lowell. Fuck confessional Lowell. Pound. There was a motherfucker who probably did some coke. This is the house of Bedlam. The man that lies in the house. What was the line? This is a Jew in a newspaper hat. Hated Jews. Pound. How long has it been? Went to the madhouse. The boy that pats the floor to see if the world is there is flat. Creaking sea of board. Dances weeping. That wasn't Pound. It was Bishop. About Pound. Some god got hold of me. I sizzled in his blue volts. That was Plath. How long has it been? Some god got hold of me. Stop whispering. Hold still. Blue volts like a desert prophet. And then the night snapped out of sight like a lizard's eyelid. But what about Pound? These thoroughbred mental cases. Lowell again. Fucking Lowell will not leave. Twice my age and half my weight. All old timers. Each of us holds a locked razor. Yes. Fuck. How long has it been? Flex your toes. Hands. Toes. Hands. Who puts a man on coke says be a statue. Count to 20. Again. Number 4. I know you heard this before. Never get high on your own supply. Stop grinning. Grinding. Not my supply. Where do you get coke this good? 10 months in this gut. What the fuck? I wish moms would hurry up. Biggie. Yes. Umbilical cords wrapped around my neck. I'm seeing my death and I ain't even took my first step. Breathe. Breathe. The MRI is whirring down, whirring to silence, out, out into the open. Praise be to the open.